And now the last introductory speech before a short break and then a panel discussion. Arun Shourie, he is member of Indian Parliament, and he is going to speak about the role of the media in shaping emerging democracy. Yes. And Mr. Shourie, his name has several times already mentioned here. He holds a PhD in economics from Syracuse University in the United States. He has been an economist with the World Bank, a consultant to the Planning Commission of India, and he held the office of the Minister of Disinvestment, Communication and Information Technology in the government of India under Mr. Vajapaye's prime ministership. Mr. Shourie, floor is yours, please.
Mr. Esko, the reason that I have been asked to speak on the media is the thing that you omitted, that I was the editor for several years of the most ferocious chain of newspapers in India, and we brought down many governments. As Mr. Sorabjee was emphasizing, as the ambassador said, actually freedom is a core value of India. We're talking about the values of India, and one of the core values is freedom. And in that, one of the vital instruments is a free media. And the testimony to this is the fact that whenever any government has raised a hand against the media, that hand has got burnt and it has had to withdraw it, and we have survived. I remember at one stage when, and the reason we have survived really is because we have the confidence that when we are in the right, we will have great lawyers like Soli Sorabjee defending us, and an independent Supreme Court which will always uphold our freedom to speak the truth. And I remember at one stage when one government whose misdeeds persons like me were documenting, they instituted a lot of inquiries, etc., against us. And all that I had to then publish a cartoon on the front page with the Prime Minister sitting behind a desk in our office saying circulation manager. Because each time he would do something against us, our circulation will go up. And that government went, but our newspaper survived. And so that core value and that core belief and the fact that the people in general are also very politicized by a series of events over the last 60 years. Therefore, the role of the media in an emerging democracy is taken as one of the fundamentals of our polity today. As Sam was mentioning, the figures are always mind-boggling. There are registered newspapers in India are about 62,500. And the circulation is about I think about 180 million, but each of these papers has about 100 million of the dailies, and each of these has multiple readers. In a family or in a village, a number of people will read these papers. We now have almost, I think, about 100 TV channels in all our languages. We have about 280 channels for the radio. So it is a very diverse and very numerous media in this way. And the fact of the matter is that, but there are other features also about this media. The first is that in contrast to Western societies, in the US, even in Europe, in the old EU, not in the Eastern Europe, which has now been amalgamated, but in Europe and the old EU and the US, newspaper circulation, for instance, has been declining by about 1 to 2% per year. in the last 5 years, it has declined by 5 to 7%. In India, in the last year, it grew by about 16%. And in the last 5 years, it has increased by about 55%. So television and other things have not replaced newspapers, but they have just added to it and added to the public interest in public issues in this way. Second feature, of course, is that it is a diverse media, and you will be surprised to know that the fastest growth actually comes in our Indian language papers, not in the English papers. In the largest 10 most read newspapers in India, there is not a single paper of English. It is a paper of one of our languages. And that is a very important point about in relation to the common person that was being asked about, and what you were saying, that the poor, how do we direct things to the poor? Because the English paper is probably being read by the better off people in the society. But it is the ordinary person who buys and hears other people read to him the newspaper which is in our own languages. And it is a very profitable business. Because, for instance, now that the circulation of Indian language papers has increased so dramatically, their advertising revenues have increased by 85% in 5 years. So it is a paying proposition to cater to the needs and urges of the poor also in this regard. The media has made several contributions to the strengthening of a democracy in India. It is one of the two institutions which actually ensure accountability. I mean, in theory, our constitution is that the executive is the people who become prime ministers and ministers are persons who command confidence of the legislature. So, in theory, the executive is responsible to the legislature. But in fact, they are the executive because they control the legislature. So, while I am a member of parliament, I know that it is not the legislature which enforces accountability as much as the judiciary and a free press which does this. And that is why we have, and of course the people in general at the time of elections, 2/3 of our members of legislatures who stand for re-election, 2/3 of them are defeated by the electorate, by the same poor, illiterate electorate. They are thrown out. And it's the same people who then will believe what the media writes about these persons, and therefore therefore its mind is conditioned in assessing the person when he comes for a vote the next time. There have been individual instances, I could narrate a large number of them. Mr. Sorabjee just now mentioned to you an instance in which persons in my paper and a very distinguished police officer actually had gone to a jail, and they discovered that there were persons who were who were there in jail awaiting trial in the courts longer for periods which would, their detention exceeded the number of years they would have had to spend inside the jail if they had been convicted. We did a series over 9 months by visiting jail after jail and getting information in spite of governments, and the courts, lawyers took it up, and then the courts gave a series of judgments, and as a result, one of the big legal scholars in India had estimated that 43,000 persons were released as a result of that single series. A second feature of democracy is that if there is any problem, the matter of environment was mentioned. If there is an environmental problem, let's say a leather unit is polluting the rivers by its dyes in some place, you can be sure that one of the features of democracy is that a free media, somebody or the other will go there. Then other papers will rush there. And then it will be taken up in parliament or other legislatures, and even an unwilling government will in the end have to act on it. And this has brought about remediation in many ways in this way. And I feel also that there is now a transition, that the Indian reader is not now just wanting an enumeration of problems of the environment, But he really wants solutions. And the media would be missing out on its opportunity if it did not lead in providing solutions. And that's the great area for partnership between Finland and India on each one of the matters that we were discussing in the forenoon in Sitra. There are several problems in every society, and certainly in the Indian media also, we need to be more conscious that, for instance, that we should not make the mistake of confusing, of taking contrariness to be independence. Often, just by denouncing something, we feel that we are establishing our independence. That then just spreads negativity or cynicism in society. That happens with much of our media in the country. I feel that there is a great danger of superciliousness becoming an ideology. And this lifestyle journalism that we have imported from the West, many of our societies, the emerging democracies, would be hurt by this process, in which film stars and parties become the great feature for journalism, because we face life and death issues, and therefore it is our duty, even if the reader wants to be titillated and diverted away from his problems, we have to keep his gaze fixed on the great issues of the time and to provide the way out. That is the function of our media in our societies. Another trend which we have imported from the West, which has become an easy way out for journalists and probably affects other societies, our experiences, we should shun it, and that is this soundbite journalism because of television. Sir, the Chancellor is here, so are you for it or against it? In brief, in one sentence. Then we go to Mr. Ao and he says, are you for it or against it? Well, one for, one against, balanced journalism, next story. But our duty is to research the subject and to then provide the facts, especially in a society in which maybe 40% people still cannot read and write. We must do much more of that. I could narrate several problems, but I'll just end with two. One is this fleeting attention. It is now becoming endemic to the media all over the world. If you look at CNN or even a serious channel like BBC, you will find they will skip from one story to the other. This itself is a security to the wrongdoer. Because a person, let's say we expose something about a minister who's corrupt. But we should be crocodiles, that if we have got his leg in our jaws, we should not leave it till we rectify it. But what is happening today? In many of our societies, a channel will broadcast a live television thing of his taking money through a sting operation. And by next day, he just keeps quiet for 3 days. By next day, they are after somebody else. So that is not the way to bring about accountability in our societies. And finally, I feel that we must, in free societies, have a slightly adversarial attitude to the powers that be. Not a hostile attitude, but a slightly distant attitude. I know that the owner of the paper, the person is a ferocious fighter who owned the paper that I used to work in. He used to recite a Sanskrit phrase, one of the terms of which you would not like, but he used to say that there are 4 things you should not get too close to or stay too far away from. Fire. If you get too close to it, you burn. If you stay so far from it, you can't cook your food. Water. If you go so close to it, you may drown. If you stay so far from it, you will be parched. And rulers. If you stay so far from them, you can't get the benefit of knowing them. You won't get information also. But if you become so close to them that you then cannot write the whole truth about them. I find that in many of our societies, the lure of prime ministers and ex-prime ministers is such that everybody wants to be close to them and thereby loses that that edge which is necessary for serving our free societies through the media. Go on. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shourie. And now we have time for a couple of questions before coffee break. Who is going to take the floor? Please, microphone here. Wait for a second.